Hello, it's Monday the 22nd of April at 9:40 in the morning. I've come to my favourite country lane once again in North Kent, and just thought I'd spend a little while here wandering around. Forecast wise it looks to be the best day of the week, where there's a bit of cloud but mostly sunny, so I thought I'd take the opportunity to come here and look around and see what's happening, at least in terms of flowers and any animal signs and bird calls, etc., that I can recognise. Perhaps there are blackcap, willow warbler, chaffinch. The bluebells are looking absolutely stunning. It's really still today as well, so I have brought my camera along just in case there's an opportunity. And just like the previous podcast, any photographs that I take, there'll be a link in the show notes taking you to the page with the results. So I hope that adds a little bit of additional interest to the podcast. But yes, back to the bluebells. They're looking absolutely stunning at the moment. I think in another 5 to 6 days, at least here in North Kent, they'll be at their best. So that's about on time, really. Usually it's the very last part of April, coming into May. In previous years, as we know, they've been either exceptionally late or very, very, very early. I was concerned they were going to be particularly early this year, given the warm weather that we've had. And although photographically, unless you're leading workshops, that doesn't pose any great problems, it does from the perspective of the natural world. Everything, particularly in the springtime, needs to be pretty much on time, and not too early, not too late, so that insects appear at the right time and have flowers to feed upon, and then in turn birds rearing their young need to feed upon the insects. So it's not just flowers, it's the whole, it's a circle really, you know, the insects, the birds and animals that rely on everything being pretty much on time. So global warming being a very real thing is quite concerning from that perspective, particularly since our winter here in Kent was really just virtually non-existent. I think we might have only had a couple of frosts and a dash of snow, and that was in late autumn in November, but spring really is here in full force. As I'm walking along, I can say, okay, wood anemones have clearly gone over, as you'd expect. Speaking of which, the anemone workshop which I gave a little while ago went very well. Went to a delightful woodland just south of Ashford, one where I hold the workshop each year. And the anemones were in beautiful condition. Weather was pretty good. Unfortunately, we didn't have much in the way of sunshine, but at least it didn't rain. So that was something at least. So yeah, that was a very, very pleasant workshop indeed. Cow parsley is now coming into flower, and of course dog's mercury, and it's really lovely, this woodland, because as I'm walking through on both sides, it's just a haze of blue. And I'm also looking down amongst the dog's mercury, and of course there are stinging nettles and some yellow rattle as well, which is a lovely flower, particularly when you're up close with a macro lens. Okay, I'm just going to jump over a gate here. I'm not trespassing, by the way. I've had permission for more than 30 years to come onto this land, and this is one of the reasons why I come to this particular lane, because I'm very fortunate in that, as I say, for the last 30 years or so, I've had permission to come into the woodland and onto the downland nearby, and that must be at least sort of 600 acres or so. So I very, very rarely meet anybody at all. Generally speaking, I have the place to myself, which makes photography and just being outdoors all the more enjoyable. And so what's been happening? Well, as I said, the wood anemone workshop went very well indeed, and then shortly after that I headed to the west coast of Finland, to Oulu to be precise, where along with Finn Nature I held a 6-day tour to photograph goshawk, eagle owl and Lecking black grouse. We had fantastic weather, really couldn't have been better. We had the full gamut. We had heavy snowfall on one of the mornings while photographing the grouse, which, as you can imagine, made for some wonderfully atmospheric photos. and we had blue sky, sunshine and cloud, and we had it all really. The only thing that was missing, and it was a great pity, particularly since 2 nights were spent in the hides waiting for them, was the eagle owl. It sadly didn't turn up, but that was compensated greatly, I guess you could say, by us photographing great grey owl. That really is, for many photographers visiting Finland in the winter and early spring, at the top of their list. They're very unpredictable, dictated by vole populations, and their whereabouts, of course, is never guaranteed. But the company that I was working with, FinNature, really went above and beyond. And so, having spent a bit of time in the grouse hide, ordinarily we would have had the rest of the day just to perhaps look over images on our laptops or drive somewhere close by to photograph maybe hooper swans on a lake or river. But instead they drove us more than 2 hours to this area where not one great grey owl or 2, but 4 were hunting in this field. And we had this, for 2 hours we had some wonderful opportunities to photograph them. And I can tell you it really was something else as well to have 4 different birds hunting close by. And photographically, you needn't have used lenses any longer than 200mm. And as I say, that more than made up for the fact that the great grey owl didn't turn up, although great pity. But of course nothing in nature is ever guaranteed. And although they've been coming to this particular site for the last 12, 13 years, well, we're there under their terms. They don't care whether or not we're waiting with our cameras to photograph them. It's up to them whether they come down or not. So that was a pity, but as I say, compensated greatly by the opportunity to photograph the great grey owl. But overall, a trip that was thoroughly enjoyed by all. Feedback that I've had has been extremely positive. The accommodation, the schedule, goshawk opportunities, amazing. In fact, we're in the same hide for the goshawk as we are for the eagle owl. So we enter these 2 converted caravans, very comfortable. There's a bed in each and a private loo, and thermostatically controlled heating, so you're very warm and cosy. But we enter the hides at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then from then until 8:30 at sunset, goshawks generally appear, and they did so, and on one occasion also in the morning as well. So we got some great pictures of goshawk feeding as well as combating with another bird that was eager to come down to the food. So we all got some really good action pictures. And as for the black grouse, boy, did we get lucky there as well. I'd organised 3 mornings to photograph the grouse. On the first we had snow, and on the second beautiful backlight, and on the final we had lots and lots of fighting. Black grouse are not the easiest of birds to photograph. In terms of their predictability, I should say, they come to an ancestral ground called a Lex site, where each spring, from the middle of March through to the end of April, males come down in numbers ranging from just a few to up to more than 40 birds. And they strut and posture and fight for dominance, and really just to impress females, which are either on the ground with them, maybe only 2 or 3, or up in the surrounding trees just looking on to see which one is the toughest and best looking of the bunch, I guess you could say. But they don't like terribly cold weather, nor do they like strong wind. So if it's -20 and the wind's blowing a gale, then it's very, very unlikely they're going to come down. However, if, as we experience, you have near perfect conditions, as in hovering around 0 and next to no wind at all, then you have a very, very good chance of seeing them. So we were getting to the hide at about 30 to 45 minutes before sunrise, so a very, very early start. A 45-minute drive, and then you got to allow 20 to 30 minutes to get settled into the hides. 2 persons per hide, and we're in there for 3 hours. So not a terribly long time, and all 3 occasions we didn't really have to wait any longer than 30 minutes before the first birds started to come down, and we had in upwards of, as I say, sort of 30 to 40 birds. And on the final morning, gosh, there was lots of fighting going on in front of us all, and I'm sure we all came away with some really, really good photos. Frankly, I could have spent every morning in there for a month watching and photographing them. It's one of nature's great spectacles. So a really, really nice trip, and one which I'm looking forward to running next year. Actually, originally I was going to skip next year and do 2026, but as it happens, the preferred dates for next year, and the dates have been specifically chosen so that they're at the peak of the lecking season, so there's a great chance of the grouse coming in, not too early where you have too cold temperatures and too much snow as it were, nor too late where the snow begins to melt and the activity starts to drop off. So the dates which I chose are quite specific, but they happen to fall on Easter next in 2026. So given that, and understandably, lots of people want to spend that time with family, and also the cost of flights and parking becomes somewhat more expensive, I've decided to go for it next year. So that will be, if I remember correctly, the 6th to the 11th of April. Those of you that are listening to this might be interested in attending, then do go onto my website and look under tours page, and you'll see the tour there. So if you're interested, drop me a line, and be good to have you along. Okay, I've stopped at this clearing now, and it's just stunning. The sun is out, the birds are singing. I'm facing into the sun, so bluebells are all beautifully backlit, along with all the young leaves on the trees as well. The beech and sweet chestnut, I can hear a wren, I can hear a wood pigeon. Of course, there's always a constant hum of traffic in the distance. That'll be the M2 motorway. But everywhere looks really gorgeous and not a breath of wind. It's absolutely stunning. So I'm so pleased, because I've got quite a busy day ahead of me. I've got to head towards Rochester and pick up something, and a few other bits and pieces to do this afternoon. But you've got to make an effort at this time of the year. It's over far too quickly. So if you get a spare hour or two, then head out to your local woods and watch the bluebells. We take this site for granted. We have the vast majority of the entire population of bluebells here in the UK. I think, if I'm correct in saying, we have more than 3/4 of the world's population of bluebells in the UK, and there's probably no better place in the UK than southern England. We're blessed with coppice woodlands and expanses of oak and beechwood, so you must go out and look and photograph them if you can. I'm really not that worried about photographing bluebells or any kind of flower anymore. I rarely go out with the sole intention of photographing them. I've always had my camera with me just in case the light is exceptional or I'm tempted to take a picture. But having spent more than 30 years photographing them and having acquired many photos, it doesn't worry me if I don't take any pictures, just to see them. I'm shielding my eyes from the sun at the moment, scanning the bluebells, perhaps looking for, because there is some lady's smock, also known as a cuckoo flower, so called, and this is rather ironic, because they flower about the same time as the arrival of the cuckoo. Well, the cuckoo hasn't called as yet. Usually I would hear it. I say usually, they've been very conspicuous in their absence over the years, and I'm yet to hear a cuckoo. I'd be interested in the show notes, if you've heard a cuckoo in your neck of the woods, do make a comment in the comment section of this particular of Podbean, and I'd be interested to know where roughly the region where you are, and whether or not you've heard a cuckoo or even a nightingale. Come to that. I've heard blackcap and chiffchaff, so the migrants are arriving, and on the marsh there are corn buntings and reed warblers, etc. And I'm sure sedge warblers too. Bitterns are also booming on the marsh, which is a fabulous sound, especially if you're lucky enough to stay on the marsh until nightfall, when they become really active. There's a pheasant calling there in the distance. So I'm really just scanning to see if there are any orange-tipped butterflies, because where there's cuckoo flower, the food plants of the caterpillar of the orange-tipped butterfly, then you are likely to see that species. But alas, no, doesn't seem to be any. I might try a photograph here actually, because now there's a gathering cloud, which makes it a lot easier to photograph, because although flowers always look beautiful when the sun's out on them, we know as photographers that in itself can create enormous problems with contrast and very distracting highlights and deep shadows, etc. But the light is really nice and soft now, so I'm gonna pause this for just a moment and see what I can find. I do have two lenses with me. I thought I would mix things up a little bit today. I've got my Nikon Z7 with me and 400mm and 100mm Laowa macro lens. I brought the 400mm. I haven't bothered with a tripod. I didn't want to be burdened with that. I just wanted to make this podcast and take as little equipment away with me. I wouldn't have dreamt of taking my 200 to 400, which I used to own when using my DSLR outfit, but now I've gone mirrorless. This 400mm is so light, and I'm confident hand holding it at sort of a 20th, 25th of a second, which would have been unheard of with a much larger 3 kilo 200 to 400. And I think, you know, you can produce some rather nice effects with super telephotos, as it were, on larger flowers like this. So I'm gonna have a go with a 400mm. There's sure to be a photo here because it's just awash with blue at the moment, and the sun is intermittent in and out, so I might be able to produce a couple of different images. And as I said right at the very beginning, if I take any pictures, then I'll put the link to the blog where you can view them. So I'll come back to you in a moment. Well, that was fun. Not quite sure how long I took there, because time just seems to fly by when you're photographing. But in the end, I just used the 400mm and the right angle viewing attachment, which is the main reason really why I opt for the Z7 with my flower photography as opposed to the Z8, because it permits me to take off the eye cup and put in a right angle finder, which is much easier when you're doing shallow depth of field images than using the tilting LCD screen, which is fine for the most part, but I don't find is really aids critical composition and focusing anywhere near as much as an angle finder attachment. So I think I've got some really pleasing photos there, so there'll definitely be some to show you. I'm also going to take just one or two with a mobile phone as well, so you get an idea of where I was taking the photos. Give you some, as I say, some idea of where I captured these images of bluebells. I did also try and photograph ferns and yellow rattle, but it didn't quite work out, and so I just kept reminding myself that bluebells are pretty short-lived in terms of their peak flowering, just a few days, and then they start to go over, and these are looking absolutely stunning, so I really just wanted to concentrate on those. So over the past, at least the last two episodes, I spoke a little about two photographers that I recommend you look at the work of, and today I'm going to speak about a photographer who hails from the Netherlands but has done so many National Geographic stories, and he is, I think, one of the most influential and most important nature photographers of our time, and his name is Frans Lanting. So some of you, I'm sure, would have heard of him. If you haven't, then you definitely need to go and look him up. I first became aware of his work in the mid-80s through a National Geographic story on Botswana, and more specifically the Okavango Delta. So he was born in the Netherlands in 1951, and so he was undertaking commissions for the National Geographic in his mid-30s. And so that was the first piece that I saw of his, and then after that followed Madagascar. And he's also got a new book out now as well, called The Bay of Life. He's teamed up for the last 30 years with his wife, Chris Ekstrom, who's a writer, editor and producer, living in Monterey Bay in California, where they've lived for the same period, about 30 years. They've come out with a new book called Bay of Life. Now, I've got several of his books. The one which I'm particularly drawn towards is called Okavango, Africa's Last Eden. But I've also got Eye to Eye as well, which is a collection of sort of stunning close-up wildlife images. He, I guess, in terms of how he popularised certain techniques, one that springs to mind is his use of balancing flash with daylight and slow shutter speeds. You'll see a number of his photographs, particularly on the Okavango story, where he's photographed lions, for example, and birds in flight using a mixture of flash and slow shutter speed. Now, this was in the mid-80s, remember, early 90s, when he would have been using film, and exposure calculations would have been done manually using what we call a flash beamer, which is an attachment to the flash which concentrates the beam to give you a stronger flash of light, as opposed to letting it spread out in all directions. So definitely a photographer that you should be aware of. He's won the BBC Wildlife Photographer of the Year award. He's won numerous awards. A very quiet man. Definitely lets his photos do the talking. A truly brilliant nature photographer, and I guess if I were ever to choose one nature photographer who I feel just encompasses everything really that a nature photographer be, in terms of his knowledge of the natural world. He sits on the board, or at least did, of the Worldwide Fund for Nature, and his artistry really. He is a photographer that I think all nature photographers should be aware of. So do look him up, Frans Lanting. One story that springs to mind, which resulted in a series of beautiful photographs of an eagle. I'm not sure what species it is for the Okavango Delta. I think it was a fish eagle, where he spent many hours in a crocodile-infested waterhole. Now, Nile crocodiles, I believe, frequent the Okavango. In fact, whilst doing a bit of research, I came across this fact that actually 3,000 people per year are killed by Nile crocodiles. So, yeah, there he was, up to his shoulders. I've seen photographs of him with his telephoto lens just above the waterline, but with his assistant some 30 to 40 yards away, in a Land Rover, keeping watch with a pair of binoculars in case they see the telltale sign of bubbles nearby, and for him to get out. So definitely a man who's gone to extremes long before the advent of digital photography, but do consider getting his books. I say, you know where to look if you want any of his books. But if you love Africa, then I would say get Okavango, Africa's Last Eden, and Eye to Eye if you want a broader collection of his images. So Frans Lanting, that's Frans Lanting, Lanting. And so I'm going to keep this reasonably short today. In terms of length of this podcast, as I've got quite a busy afternoon coming up. As you're aware, I shoot quite a lot of film, predominantly black and white, but actually entirely black and white now. I dabbled with colour in medium format, but it didn't really suit me, and I love shooting landscapes and close-ups in black and white. And for the last, I think, 4 years, I've been using Hasselblad equipment. And so last week I spent a couple of days, I hired a professional darkroom for 2 days, and produced some silver gelatin traditional wet process prints. It's not new to me. It's something which I guess you could say I'm reasonably experienced in doing. I worked as a black and white and colour hand printer, as well as doing it at home in my formative years. And so I was dying to get back in. I had all these negatives, and sure, I can scan them with a digital camera and look at them on the computer, but you know, nothing really compares with being in a darkroom, manipulating the print through using card and your hands, and selecting the correct paper grade and dropping it into the developer, stop, bath and fix. So it was really lovely to go back in. So I had 2 8-hour sessions, which just flew by actually, and I'm actually this afternoon I'm going to pick them up. So I've produced these photographs using the fibre-based paper. You get 2 types of paper, fibre-based and resin-coated. Resin-coated is one which most gravitate toward because it's kind of a plastic-coated and it dries really quickly and it's very hard-wearing. On the other end of the spectrum, there's fibre-based paper, which really soaks up an awful lot of water and takes an age to dry, whereas a resin-coated print you can dry in under 5 minutes in a dryer. With fibre-based, you really have to, for the most part, just let it dry naturally, and that can take more than 48 hours. And so they're laid on mesh racks, sort of 2 metres by 1 metre, after being squeegeed on a perspex sheet, and then laid on these mesh covered racks for at least 2 days. So now I'm going to pick them up and decide what I'm going to do with them. Some of them will invariably have a few dust marks on them, so I've got a bit of spotting to do with a paintbrush and requisite inks. So it's pretty archaic in terms of the process, but I just love the hands-on part of wet printing. not knowing when I'll be going back into the darkroom, but I hope sooner rather than later. It's a thoroughly enjoyable process, but I only produced 4 prints over that period of 8 hours. I was much more concerned with producing a print that I was really happy with, rather than just, rather than producing maybe a dozen, 20 or so prints that will never see the light of day. So they've all run through an archival process as well, which means extra long fixing time, and that's the final stage after the developer and the stop bath. You put it into the fix, that fixates the image as it were permanently, and then it has to go into an archival washer for maybe 45 minutes or so to make sure that it's completely rid of any fix whatsoever. So it's quite a long drawn out process, but one which, as I said a couple of times before, is I find really, really enjoyable. It's just that hands-on experience that you get in a wet darkroom, as it were, that you don't get with computers. And sure, computers are much more convenient. And I said I could have easily have scanned them, which I do anyway with them, because they have to be scanned in order to appear on the website, which I'll be doing in the fullness of time. But for my real personal enjoyment, and I'm looking at selling them as limited edition prints as well, and they're completely unique because no 2 prints are ever going to be the same, because there's always going to be fractions of a second difference between dodging and burning and with the developer, etc. So every print that's up for limited edition will be completely different to the other, and there'll be small limited editions as well, perhaps no more than 10, 15 prints per edition, and just a selected number as well. And having gone through the archival process, they will last, well, many hundreds of years. So passing them on through the family, whether it be my family or yours, should you wish to purchase one, they will last and last. So be picking them up this afternoon, and then I shall look at spotting and then mounting them using using kind of a T-mount, as it were. And presenting them perhaps in a frame as well. So looking forward to picking them up this afternoon. In terms of tours and workshops that are coming up, nothing really to speak of. I've got a couple of lectures. I've got one on Thursday, which is for a group called My Photo Club, which some of you may have heard of. I'm just checking the details here. So yeah, that's on Thursday. It's called My Photo Club, and they invite photographers from, well, all over the world really to give talks. So I'm looking forward to that. So it's called My Photo Club. So if you'd like to listen in, it's on one of my most popular lectures, Passion Projects, actually. So go onto their website, My Photo Club, and you'll be able to listen in on that. And on Friday I've got a lecture to Monmouth Camera Club. Another, of course, Zoom presentation. A bit far to go for just a talk. And then following that, I've got a lecture at Thanet Camera Club. That's an in-person lecture. And the talk, not sure what the talk is on that one at the moment. I'll double check. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I can always check when I get back. And then a talk on Tuesday the 7th at Billericay, and so on and so forth. And next month I'm off to Finland to visit my old friend, where we have a week of canoeing and hiking and generally catching up. We haven't seen each other for quite a few years, but generally every sort of 3 to 4 years I go over there and we go hiking or skiing or something. So on this occasion he's been quite unwell, unfortunately. Let me see, about 6-7 months ago he told me he had cancer. And so obviously devastating, but he's responded extremely well to treatment, and he seems to have, at least for the time being, of put it to bed anyway, so to speak. So that's really, really good news. But it does rather jumpstart you into action, as it were, in that life is too short, and that you shouldn't just think about whether or not you should see someone or go on a trip with someone, but you just got to do it. So as soon as he discovered he had that and he let me know, we set up a trip straight away, regardless of how his treatment was going. He was desperate for us to do something. So literally within a matter of a couple of days, I booked a flight and a car, and we'll be heading over there next month. So really looking forward to catching up with him. He's also a photographer, but he's a wilderness guide. So he's absolutely first rate in terms of just the right chap to be with if you go on hiking expeditions, as we have over the last 25 plus years together. But more than that, it will just be lovely to spend time with him and to catch up. So that's all for now. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to sharing more news with you next time. Until then, take care. Well, that was going to be the end, but I thought I'd take you with me for a little while onto the North Kent marshes. I've picked up my prints from Rochester, and given that I'm not all that far away from the Isle of Grain, excuse me, I've just been interrupted by a wren. It's not too bad, is it? And in the distance I can hear the skylark over Arable. There's a plane just overhead there. Anyway, it's disappearing. As I collected my things to drive over to Rochester to pick up my prints, and given that it's not that far away from the Isle of Grain, picked up my camera bag containing the Hasselblad and tripod, and I've headed over here to a favourite little walk of mine, which is to the north of the Isle of Grain. So as I'm looking directly north over them across the River Medway, I can see the oil refineries of Canvey Island. I can hear wren, skylark, robin. The arable fields ahead of me are lined by willow, and the weather's really very nice. There's barely a breath of wind. Got to take these opportunities while I can, given the forecast. As I said previously, while I was in the wood photographing the bluebells, isn't looking all that good for the following few days. And the skies are just marvellous here on the Kent marshes, none more so on the Isle of Grain, where you have this wonderful 360 degree panorama. And yes, to a degree it is rather flat and, dare I say, even featureless, but there is a beauty to that as well, and something which is, I guess you could say, is in my blood, given that I've lived in this kind of habitat, for want of a better phrase. And there, wait a second, I'm just taking in my first whiff, as it were, of hawthorn in blossom. It's my favourite scent. It's just coming into flower, and the Kent marshes at this time, it's actually quite early by 10 days or so, usually come the 2nd or 3rd week of May. They're in full flower, but I'm looking now at a couple of hawthorn bushes in flower, and the scent from hawthorn is just lovely, and it's one I always look forward to at this time of the year. There's a bumblebee there. Excuse these moments of silence. We have to take it in while we can, don't we? So now I'm on this pathway, just leading north to the edge of the River Medway. I've no idea what I'm going to photograph. I may not photograph anything at all, but just seeing and smelling the hawthorn and listening to the skylarks is enough for me. I've got the camera bag on my back, tripod, I've had a spot of lunch, couldn't be better. Stretching my legs, beautiful spring afternoon, some quite interesting cloud formations. I'm looking for some breaks. I love doing cloudscapes over here, not necessarily including any of the land at all, just the clouds themselves. It's really quiet. I'm just looking across the field to a favourite willow tree of mine, and this is really the best time for me to see it, because it's not bare as it is in winter and not in full leaf where it disguises its features, but just now when there are some signs of fresh leaves, and it's got a lovely shape to it. I'm thinking perhaps it might be worth a photograph, but no, I'll leave that. I'll leave it for now. Okay, Okay, continuing the walk. It's about another 10 minutes or so till I reach the riverbank. High tide is about 12:30, 1:45. I like it at this time when it's just starting to recede and starts to reveal the mud and jetsam and flotsam and bits of timber and driftwood. I can often make some nice foregrounds for images. The cow parsley here is also coming into flower. I can't stress enough what a lovely day it is. It's so still, it's bright, there might be a few spots of rain in the air, but looking across the river, looking across the Medway to Southend and Canvey, there's some great cloud formations. It's going to look really good in black and white. I really hope I can take a few pictures today. I've got a little bit of time, so earlier on Saturday rather, I developed a roll of film. First time in quite a few months. I've just been too busy. But that was fun. Very, very satisfying. Going out for the day and then coming back and processing the roll. It's very, very satisfying as you unroll that film, as it were, from the spiral and hang it up to dry. And then perhaps a few weeks or months later, we've got just a light aircraft passing overhead. So it'd be nice to maybe shoot a roll today and process over the next couple of days, and maybe head into the darkroom and print one or two of the results, which I'll endeavour to put onto my blog, and I'll notify you when they're there to see in another of my podcasts. There's a reed-lined water-filled ditch ahead of me, and not far now from the river. So I've made myself down onto the salt marsh. The tide has receded, and I spotted a potential photo from the raised wall. As I said, there's barely a breath of wind, and so there's some lovely reflections of the water trapped in these pools from the tide. I'm just very gingerly making my way across the saltings. There are some hidden traps, some hidden gaps, should I say. So I'm just being mindful of this, and there's a really nice reflection coming up just to my right here, and it's producing this nice zigzag, and the clouds are beautifully reflected. I'd like the sky to have been a touch more interesting, but I think this could be worth a photo. Let's just keep looking. Yes, definitely worth a photo. And it's going to look really nice in black and white. Scenes like this are just fantastic in black and white because, you know, there's a fair amount of green in the photo which can detract from the graphic shape of the water, of the ditch rather, the saltings. And I want this to be all about the composition. The sky's got some nice texture. I'm thinking maybe an orange filter here, and an orange filter absorbs blue, but it also lowers the values of green. So any green in the picture will render quite dark, but add a touch of contrast. It's really still, so I'm going to use a slow speed film, I think, Pan F, which is ultra fine grain, 50 ISO. As far as what lens to select, well, I think it's going to be the wide angle. So that's the 50mm on a Hasselblad. It's equivalent to about 28mm on a full frame. So I think I'll just pop my tripod down now, camera bag off my back. It's okay, there are little egrets I can see further on. I don't think it's been as still as this for the many years that I've been coming over here. It's so still with mirror light reflections. But I'm not going to tempt fate. I'm going to put you on hold for a moment while I get my gear together and see what I can make of the scene. So I've just made this photograph of the scene which I was describing. I'm very happy with it, and I've got some high hopes. I deliberated whether or not to use a green filter actually or an orange filter in the end. Green gives greater separation on the salt marsh of the green tones, but I really wanted the emphasis to be on the sky and on the reflections, so by using an orange filter it gives you slightly greater contrast in the sky. Certainly it brings out those clouds, plus it marginally darkens the green, so there'll be greater emphasis on the reflections. As suspected, I used the wide angle 50mm lens. I took a handheld spot meter reading from a middle tone, saw that the sky was about 2 stops brighter, so I added a 2-stop hard edge graduated filter to that, and as I said, plus an orange filter, which I need to add an additional 1 stop to. It's quite a dense filter, so I need to remember to open up the aperture by 1 stop. It initially gave me an exposure reading of 1/8 of a second at f16, so I made it 1/8 at f11 and took 2 pictures of scenes that I have sort of a feeling for in terms of having sort of great hopes for, as it were. Say great might be too strong a word. Good hopes, or hopeful of, shall we say. I always do 2. One as insurance, really, because anything can happen to a negative. It can get damaged, it can get partially scratched, or there could be some kind of dust spot on it which is hard to remove. So another negative just gives me peace of mind that I will hopefully have one good negative upon which to work. I'm inclined to stay here just for a little bit longer because the cloud formations are really nice and changeable. And again, it's very, very still. It's got these beautiful reflections. Opportunities like this don't come around too often. And although yes, every frame is costing me money, it's a lot cheaper taking a few more pictures than it is coming back again in the hopes of getting something similar. So we'll see what materialises. I made a small adjustment and took another couple of photos. I only moved about 1.5 meters or so to the left, but it seemed to make just enough of a difference. Still incredibly still. Clouds are just slowly moving across the sky, really just changing the appearance of the photo with every minute that passes by. And this is why it's so important that when you're shooting landscapes, is just to stay put and just watch and see what materialises, because much like flowing water, the position of the clouds can make a huge difference to the end result. So yeah, that picture also changed my mind with regards to the filter, because when I changed position, the yellow grasses were more apparent, so I swapped from an orange filter to a yellow, which absorbs that same colour, so the yellow grasses will appear lighter against the darker green. So I took a couple of photos of that, and now I'm just heading towards another pool. So I'm walking across the salt marsh, and there's some driftwood which I'm just approaching here, and one of them has given me a very handy bridge across the saltings. I wish I had a big enough house to take some of this driftwood back with me. Some of it has some beautiful details. I can see a project there with just photographing driftwood close up. Now I've got to be really careful here because it's particularly muddy, and although I'm wearing walking boots, you've still got to be very careful. I don't really want to get stuck in the mud some distance away from anyone, because there's not a soul to be seen here. It's just how I like it. So let's see how this looks. Okay, it's still producing mirror calm reflections. The shape of the course, the water course leading to the river, it's about 3.5 to 4 metres across and snakes its way through the saltings. Now where I was originally standing, there was this lovely S-shape curve leading to the horizon, and you know what curiosity done, don't you? And no, this doesn't look anywhere near as appealing as the photo I just made. So I'm going to leave that and head along the banks of the Swale, or rather banks of the Medway. The Swale's to the south of this. So the Swale, which is a channel from the North Sea, it's neither a river nor an estuary. The Swale is, well, it lies between Sittingbourne and Merston, Tenham and the Isle of Sheppey. So Elmley Marsh, if you're familiar with that. So you've got that stretch of water, which is the Swale. And then to the north of the Isle of Sheppey, in between the Isle of Sheppey and the Isle of Grain, you've got the River Medway. And then to the north of the Isle of Grain, and across the water, Essex, Tilbury, etc., you've got the River Thames. All part of the North Kent marshes. The reflections are still very, very nice indeed. There's a few little flowers starting to appear on the saltings. Nice and dry underfoot. Another 20 yards or so and I'll be on the seawall looking across. Oh yes, oops, just disturbed some oyster catchers. There, you can hear them. And it's dead calm. It's dead calm. Curlew as well. It's just lapping up onto the shingle shoreline. Not sure if there's a photo here, but it doesn't matter. Looking back to where I've just walked to see if there's any opportunities there, and there are none. So I'm going to continue my walk along the shoreline. So now I'm walking along the shoreline, looking across the Thames. Some really nice reflections of the clouds. Some beautiful contrast. Cumulus. No blue to speak of, no gaps between the clouds, but it doesn't matter, there's still lots and lots of definition. And the grass, the sedge, with the receding tide is now revealing itself. And I rather like the contrast it's producing here. It's kind of laying flat on the water, producing this almost silvery-like texture to it. The water just gently lapping. Just stopping for a moment, considering my options as to whether or not I take a photo. But I'm just enjoying it for now. Mindful of course that the tide is receding, so what I'm looking at the moment, I have to make a decision sooner or later. Because if I wait too long, the photo's lost, but that's not such a big deal, particularly since I'm happy, more than happy with that which I've already taken of the channel leading through the saltings. But the clouds are really good, and April and May are my two favourite months for cloudscapes and landscape photos in an area like this. You know, that spring weather brings through some inclement weather, and in combination sometimes of strong winds with rain and rainbows. Certainly my most atmospheric images of the marshes, cloudscapes anyway, have been made during these months. Another plane just flying overhead, maybe going to Southend Airport. But anyway, I'm going to see if there's a photo to be made here. Well, I've set up on a scene that is a little different to what I'd normally take, but it's piqued my interest. I don't shy away from the good, the bad and the ugly of the North Kent marshes. Yes, there's an awful lot of beauty. The big open skies and the apparent wildness of it, and of course I'm on the banks of the Thames at the moment. And when you think of the Thames, you think of Tilbury and the docks, etc. But all I can see opposite me is, well, just a distant horizon. And the Thames lapping up on the shoreline. But about 20 yards up on the shoreline is a sofa, and in pretty good condition too. And it's just made me smile, actually, because of course along with the driftwood you get all of human throwaways, as it were, landing up on the shore. Unfortunately, much of it to the detriment of the wildlife, plastic, etc. And you know, you can't shy away from that when you're a landscape photographer. It's not all about pretty sunrises and sunsets. I think that gives a very false impression of the British countryside. You know, we have some murky grey weather, we have mist, and we have rain and drizzle, and there is much of it that isn't pretty. So it needs to be recorded. So I'm photographing this at the moment. I won't go mad on various viewpoints. I'm just going to maybe just take 1 or 2 pictures. As I said, I nearly always take 2 photos just to be sure that there is one negative that is going to be fine and that hasn't been affected by anything that might happen during development and printing. As far as the technical aspects are concerned, I've stuck with the same lens, 50mm lens equivalent to a 28. I've got a graduated filter down on it because the sky is reasonably bright. I've put the sofa somewhere in the middle with a sort of soft shingle leading up to it, and a graduated filter, as I said, just to tone down the sky, and a yellow filter to add a bit of texture, a deep yellow filter, a number 12. Standard yellow filters are Kodak Raton number 8, so this is slightly deeper, so it gives a slightly more pronounced than a standard yellow filter, but without going over the top. It's more about just kind of recording it, and a yellow filter gives you quite a naturalistic result than without a filter. So I'd just take a couple of shots of this scene. As I say, it's just piqued my interest really. Made me smile for the wrong reasons. There's just 2 walkers now on the seawall. The sky is really broody, even more broody now. It's really dark skies, and the wind is still very, very still. It's barely even noticeable. I'm so pleased I came over here. So I'll take this picture and carry on walking along the banks. Well, the weather's changing. I was just setting up for a picture across the Thames. Some lovely cloud formations and reflected. And as I'm about to set the camera up upon the tripod, the wind's picked up, the reflection's lost. A few spots of rain. But that might just mean there's more interesting weather to come. So I'll just go through this gate. So I'm really pleased that I came when I did and made the most of it. I see hoary cress is coming into flower, otherwise known as thannic weed. I don't like the word weed, it's just, weeds generally refer to flowers or plants, I think, that are in places people would rather they not be. They're plants. They're as important. A nettle and a thistle is as important, one might argue, more than any other plant in the garden. They provide an essential source of nectar and food plant for numerous butterfly species. Hoary cress, look it up if you can, Hoary, is a white flower that come, and it'll be a couple of weeks yet, so I think it's in full flower, so that'll be about right as we're heading into May. And it produces these lovely sort of carpet swathes of white along the sea wall of the North Kent marshes and the South Kent marshes as well, but mostly here in the north. And as I'm walking along the banks, ahead of me, yes, there's the refinery of Canvey Island, and the wind's dropping again, so that's rather nice. There's a water-filled ditch that's snaking its way to the Thames. That's got some reeds perfectly reflected, so I might head down there. But for now I'm just going to continue along the wall here, see if there's a view that might be worthy of a photo. So we'll continue. So I've made my way down away from the seawall, so with my back to the Thames. Well, there's a nice long ditch with some lovely reflections, and you might just hear some Canada geese calling as well. They clearly don't like my presence, so I'm going to walk back onto the seawall. Birds are funny, geese particularly. You've only got to move a few yards away from this invisible circle and they just carry on. You know, I've walked no more than another 10 paces and they're perfectly calm now, just swimming along. Nice reflections actually. So I'm going to walk back onto the seawall and see how it now looks, because as I said, the wind did pick up and spoil any chance of reflections. And actually on the far side, now we're looking towards Essex now across the Thames. If you can picture this, gentle ripples, the Thames lapping up, really calm, very dark sky, and in the distance, I don't know whether it's Southend, I guess it must be, just illuminated by the sun. Actually looks quite nice. I've only visited Southend a couple of times, many years ago, so I can't really comment what it's like as a place. But, you know, I like Margate and Ramsgate, Broadstairs, and it's not much different, I'm sure. And under this light it looks very nice indeed. I'm not sure if there's a picture though, because it's more suited to a panorama here rather than square. So I rather just like looking around me, see if there's anything else, but I don't think so. I think I'm going to start making my way back to the car soon. But let's see, you never know what I might come across en route. Well, it's been at least an hour since I last spoke. Been checking out some places for potential pictures, but didn't materialise into anything. Incredible sky, jet black, spotlight in the distant towns of Southend, Canvey Island. There are tankers, huge, great tankers, loaded up, heading out into the North Sea. But I'm walking back to the car now. I'm only a couple of hundred or so metres away. Threat of rain in the air, but remain dry. There's now a really dark grey, brooding mackerel sky. But I'm going to sign off now. That's not to say that this is an absolute certain, because you know what happened this morning with me finishing in the woodland. I thought that was going to be it, and then I found myself on the Isle of Grain and thought I'd continue. So we'll see how it goes, but at least the idea now is to head back home for dinner. And so until next time, thank you for listening, take care and goodbye. And so, as it turns out, I didn't go straight home, but instead to the south side of the Isle of Grain, to Hoo Marina, where there are some wonderful old decaying barges on the banks of the Medway. So I've been here now for the last hour. The light is really dropping now. It's now close to 5 o'clock, so of course I'm going to hit the traffic on the way home, but it's been more than worth it. It's been a really good day, and I hope you've enjoyed being with me on this. And so most definitely on this occasion, I'm on my way home now. Get some dinner. This is definitely it. I certainly won't be stopping on the way home. Thank you again for listening, and until next time, take care and goodbye.